You may or may not recognize today's guest by name, but you've probably seen her work. Michele Nelson-Schmidt is the author and illustrator behind several children's books, including Cordelia, Bob as a Unicorn, and the new WhatIf Monster series. She's also a motivational speaker and often speaks at elementary schools. Nelson-Schmidt is often compared to Mr. Rogers because of the messages of her books. She's never been to Eastern Idaho, but is hoping to stop through here in the future. I spoke with her several years ago prior to working for East Idaho News, and I'm just catching up with her now to get an update on where her career is going. Michele Nelson-Schmidt joins us now for a phone conversation. Hello, Michele.
Hey, Rhett, how are you?
Good to talk to you again. Idaho is you've been to many states, but Idaho is one state you haven't made it to yet.
I know, it is not, and I'm trying to get to all 50, and that is one of my elusive 7 that I haven't been to.
Well, so have you been in contact with anyone in Idaho?
No, I haven't, and it's been really because I've just been so busy, and then this year I'm doing a lot of production on some projects, but I just haven't kind of really tried to make it my mission to get there yet. But if it comes up, it'd be great. But no, I just haven't tried to make it happen yet, just because of my schedule.
Gotcha. Well, you're a busy woman.
Yes.
Several books. You do a lot of Facebook Live videos. Story times, you're a motivational speaker. What's on your plate currently? Do you have a project up and coming?
Yeah, my current project is in October of last year, I decided I wanted to self-publish an easy reader series. And I wanted to self-publish for a couple different reasons. One of which was I wanted control of the series. I wanted to have it come out when I wanted it to come out. I wanted control of it staying available and not having to worry about things going out of print. And just basically that was it. And I didn't want to have to wait a couple years. So the first book came out in December, and I've been thinking about this project for years. And I actually was offered it to my publisher, and before they could answer, I rescinded the offer because I decided I really wanted to do it myself. So it's probably my most ambitious project to date, and I'm doing 18 books that will come out in about 18 months. So I'm currently, I just released book 3. I'm finishing book 4, which will come out April 1st, and I actually slowed it down in February and March to get a few extra weeks of production in, and I'm finally ahead a couple books. So I anticipate with summer coming, when my travel slows down again, to be able to get on top of it. So I do think, knock on wood, barring any unknown things that come up in life, that I will produce the rest of the series a month at a time until it's done, and there's 18 books. So that is taking up a lot of my time because I hired an editor. I have an editing process. I'm also translating the series into Spanish, so that's a lot, and I'm traveling. So
what's the name of the series?
It is the WhatIf Monster chapter book series.
Oh, okay.
And it is based on the picture book, Jonathan James and the WhatIf Monster. But what it's doing is, I've always wanted, visualize kind of that the series is sort of a cartoon. And so in my mind, it's like all these episodes, and it's an easy reader. So it's about for first or second grade level for brand new readers or independent readers, or it's a great read aloud for that age. And all the books are set in a dyslexic friendly font. And they're 3 chapters. They're pretty formulaic, where basically it's this group of kids in Jonathan James's second grade class, and dealing with just all the anxieties that kids come up across. And some are, simple ones, like having to read a paragraph out loud in class, to I will get into some bigger, heavier topics as well, like death of a grandparent, death of an animal, things like that get a little bit more heavy. But I'm just dealing with basically all these things that in the last 10 years as I've been traveling and talking to kids and being in the schools, really hearing these things that kids want to hear about and want to read about and want to see themselves. And the other thing with this series is I'm making it so inclusive. I'm trying to make sure that by the end of the series, any kid out there can read these series and they're going to see themselves in that book, whether it's a biracial family or a family that has two dads or two moms, or one of my main characters has profound hearing loss and she has to wear hearing aids. So that's basically just, it's kind of, I call it my love letter to children. This whole series is just to make sure all these kids I've met through the years realize that they matter, that I've been listening, and they're all going to show up in these books.
Yeah. Well, and I remember when I spoke with you last time, you mentioned that, you know, it was a conscious decision to write specifically for children, and then all of your work has a central message or theme attached to it. And I want to talk more about that in just a minute, but I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because this is a series that you are self-publishing, and you did that because you were encountering, it sounds like you were encountering some challenges with having a publisher. So do you want to talk about some of those things?
Yes, and I love my publisher. Right now, I have only published with one publisher because they kept saying yes to the books. I've had some rejections from them, but in general, I've been very fortunate that they've liked the books that I've submitted to them. But with any publisher, what can happen is, you know, they have control. They can say, this is a topic we don't want to really deal with right now. It could be a little controversial, so they might shy away from something like that. Or I've seen series that they've produced where, and again, it's my specific publisher, how their business model works is they can have a series out and then they might discontinue a book in the series one by one, and then suddenly it's not available. I had one of my books recently go out of print, and it was a major part of my presentation, and they just, it's a sales matrix. The sales dip below a certain number, and they're like, we're discontinuing that. And I was like, well, that's kind of a big deal in my presentation, but you know, business is business. And then I just started thinking, if I do this series and they said yes, they have all that control, and they can decide a topic that I really want to write about might be too controversial, and that could affect sales. Or, you know, maybe book 3 is not selling as well, and it just could. I know with self-publishing, I have all that control, and I can make sure that my books stay available, and I'm not going to worry about sales. And I probably, with all the production costs that I have, I probably won't make profit on this series till sometime later this year. But I'm not really doing it for the money. Obviously, I don't want to be losing money, but it's something that I really feel like I need and I want to do for children. And it is a good marketing tool too, because it is helping all my sales across the board, and they are really selling well at my school visits too. So that's a very nice, not surprise, but it's nice that the schools really want these easy readers.
Well, listen, let me go back to the beginning. What was the first book you ever published?
My first 2 books were Cats, and Dogs, and they published in 2011 as a set. They weren't sold together, but they went together. And they weren't big message books. They were books basically that were a result of me painting pet portraits for 8 years, and I painted lots and lots of dogs and cats, and those books were very successful. They still are solid sellers. They are still sell at my school visits. You can't go wrong with dogs and cats with little kids. So those were my first 2 books, and it was Jonathan James, the WhatIf Monster. That was my 3rd book that came out the following year in 2012.
You write your books and you do the pictures as well. How did you, when did you decide to become an author, and how did that all come about?
I have always been a storyteller, I think, since I was a little kid. I always loved to have everybody looking at me, and I could, take any boring story and kind of embellish it and tell the story so that everybody's focused on me. I love to tell stories. And I think I've always wanted to do this, but I went to school. I was always an artist. I've been drawing since I was a little kid, and drawing came very easy to me. But I didn't consider myself a writer really ever, and I didn't even consider myself that particularly much of a reader. I'm a very slow reader. I love books, but but I've always been in love with children's books. And I guess it was just finally when people were buying my art from all those pet portrait years, and I had developed this really fun style that I thought kids would really like. I just said, I want to tell stories to kids. I wanted to be in the schools. That was probably my biggest goal my goal to get published, because they won't let just anybody come in to a school and talk to kids. You have to have done something worthy, and a book would get me in the door. And I think that was kind of a lot of my motivation. Was I just love children. I want to tell them stories. I want to, entertain them and kind of make them believe in themselves through my books. And it's funny because I got rejected for a really long time because of some of my subject matter too. People will call it didactic, which I didn't even know when I kept getting rejected with that word. And I looked it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of am. But I'll tell you, parents and teachers and kids do seem to like my books. So I've got great sales. They're not, New York Times reported numbers or anything, but they're pretty good sales. They've been paying my bills for a while. So I'm really glad that I finally just said, I'm a storyteller that writes my words down, is how I describe myself.
This message of teaching kids to believe in themselves, I think that's a universal message we all relate with, but was that a part of your growing up years? Was that something you struggled with, believing in yourself?
Looking back, I've had wonderful parents that have always encouraged me, always told me, we can do me and my sisters, we could do anything that we set our minds to. My mom particularly, she was tough. If you didn't do something, we didn't get rewarded for grades or anything like that. If, I got straight A's a lot when I was a kid, and my parents, I came home one day and was like, ooh, everybody's getting paid for their grades. I got straight A's. And they said, because that's what you're capable of. You should get straight A's if that's what you're capable of, and you shouldn't expect a reward for doing what you can do in life. And that's kind of how I was raised.
Wow.
Which put on me, it was, you do the right thing and you work hard because you can. And that's the reward itself. And that really was instilled in me. And that, I think, I tell children all the time, I've experienced so much rejection and so much working towards something and falling back and wanting this to happen, and it didn't happen, and having my heart broken a million different ways for lots of different reasons, and coming out the other side. And that's what I'm very open with children about, my quote failures, because I tell the kids, I said, you don't figure out who you are by always, getting your way. It's when you fall down and have to get back up. It's when people tell you no over and over again, and you don't think there's anything more you can do to improve and to still get back up and try again. And I share that with them really openly. And I think that's when the kids hear me say, I'm not just somebody up here telling you stuff. I'm living it. And one of my books that I self-published before this series was Cordelia and the Whale. And I had talked to my publisher about it. It's a companion book to one of my picture books that sells really well. And I worked so hard on it, and I didn't think I could do it. And I did it, and I sent it in, and they totally rejected it. And that was probably one of the biggest blows with my publisher I'd had in a long time. And I self-published that one. And so if I hadn't gone through all that grief and heartache and self-published it, I wouldn't know how to do these easy reader books as well and as fast as I can. I had to go through that rejection and that pain and that hurt. But and I tell kids in my presentation now, I said, look at these books that I can do now on my own, but it's only because I got rejected. It's only because I had to find a different way. And kids really respond to that. They don't want to hear about all your successes. They want to hear about when you fall down and got back up. And it helps them to know that they can do the same thing.
And that's great, because I think kids today are fed this message of just entitled to be successful.
Yeah. And this bizarre YouTube generation, so many kids come up to me and I'm like, what do you want to do? And a lot of them say, I want to be a YouTube star. And I'm like, I hope you're listening to my messages because do you have a backup plan? But they keep hearing these crazy stories of success on YouTube. And I can't even fathom that parents, and I don't want to fault the parents, but oh my gosh, what pressure to put a kid on YouTube and you're literally teaching them their value is based on likes and based on, screen time. And oh my gosh, it's just every day I wish that I didn't need to be on Facebook for my business, but I very much promote myself. That's how I market myself. But I do. I walk away from it so often and just have to put my phone down because, and then to have these 8-year-olds, and I get it, they're making $20 million and great, but what is going to happen to them when they're not famous anymore, when they're not getting those likes? Or just even, I used to do Storytime Live on YouTube, and I got off of there because there's such nasty human beings that will show up just to be mean to people. And I wanted to protect my audience, and I just don't find that on Facebook. And especially because I think it's the algorithm that you kind of have to come looking for me on Facebook, whereas on YouTube, anybody can show up. And they did. And that only lasted a couple months. And I'm like, I don't want any kid to get exposed to people like that. Not when I can control it not happening. So
yeah, wow. Now, so you may have already answered this question, but when you go around speaking at schools, what you said kids really respond. What is the number one thing that kids are really hungry for from your experience? What is it they really gravitate towards most in your messages?
I think it's a combination of hearing me say how much they matter and how much they don't need this big, giant thing. Because I tell them, I said, what I want you to do is find things that give you joy. Do things for the sole purpose that it gives you joy. And if you figure out what that is for you, and it might not be your job, it could be other things. You might do a job solely for the money, but you do something else that brings you joy. Or maybe like me, it is both your job and what you do that brings you joy. And I said, and you have so much to offer, but when you share who you are and share your joy with the rest of us, you'll change the world just by being you. And I think they're so hungry to hear that they're okay exactly as they are, and that a goal can be, let me find something that just lights me up inside. And I tell them, for me, it's drawing. For me, it's, it's writing. But I said, mostly it's talking to you guys and being in a room and talking with you. And I said, it might be, you love horses. And maybe one day you're going to have a job that, it's an okay job, but you get to ride horses on the weekend. And that's your joy. That's your passion. Because I think there's a mixed message, too, of these kids have to figure out what's this big, giant thing that's going to make me rich. And, and kids ask me a lot, am I rich? And I say, I have a different definition of rich than you probably have. And I said, do I have a private airplane? Do I have 5 houses? Do I have 3 cars? I said, I have enough money that I can pay my bills. I have enough money that I was able to help send my kids to college. I said, if I save up money, I can take vacations. And I said, and I get to wake up every day and love who I get to be. And I said, that I think is the definition of rich. I said, that's my definition of rich. And I said, and it's very attainable for everybody if you stop deciding, you need to be a millionaire, which, again, that's these messages that these kids keep getting is you got to be famous and have all this money and ride on private planes. And that is a message they are inundated with. And so to hear that they don't have to want that, I think that's what they're hungry for, just to know that they're okay as they are.
Something you said earlier about, this message of kids can love themselves exactly for who they are. That's very Mr. Rogers-esque. You sound like a female version of Mr. Rogers.
He was a huge influence on me growing up. I watched him growing up all the time. And we do have a lot of overlapping messages. And, I watched him growing up, and it wasn't until in the last couple of years, he's kind of had this resurgence. And I get compared to him a lot, which, of course, is the biggest compliment of my life, that people say, I think of Mr. Rogers, I think of Miss Michele. And, yes, I think I have that same heart for children that he had, to make sure that, there's a huge population, kids with autism. There's something about them during my presentation, they will really connect with me. And I've had nonverbal kids come up to me. I've had kids that hadn't touched anybody but their parents in years come up and hug me. And really amazing stories that the teachers afterwards say, you have no idea how big a deal that was, that connected with you. And I think it's that because they're hearing, I'm okay. I can be happy right now. I can be joyful right now. It's not something that's in the future, I have to change to do this, or I have to change to do that. Like, they can be themselves right now and feel okay. And I do think my art, I have big giant art during my presentations, and there is, one of these days when I have extra time, I am going to research the phenomenon that I see happen over and over again, that if you combine any subject in the world with art, visual art, something happens in the brain that connects these kids and really tunes them in. Because I've been watching it happen for 10 years, and I know there's probably names of it. I don't know exactly what happens, but I think every subject that we teach children should include visual art with it. And I think kids would learn quicker and better and remember more, because I don't know what it is, but I just see it happen over and over again. And the parents tell me, they're like, my kid came home and remembered everything you said. Like, they sat there and told me all these details, and I don't know how they remembered all of that. And I said, it's something that happens with the art. I don't know what it is, but I tell my stories with the art, and they remember everything. And I think it's something the school should start to employ. I just don't know how to convince them.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, my kids absolutely love your book, Cordelia. I will sit down with them and I will read it to them, and every time, I don't know why, because my kids are very high energy, bounce off the wall kind of kids, but every time we read that book, they seem to settle down and they snuggle closely. They love looking at the pictures, and they love the plot of the book. And so I agree. I think you've got something that really speaks to kids, and I don't know necessarily what it is. But of all of your books, what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
When kids ask me that, I say it would be like asking if I love my son or my daughter better.
And I've heard other creative people say that. So
yeah, and I love them equally, but for different reasons. It's the feeling I have with each of them, how each book helps different kids in different ways. Cordelia is pretty special. Cordelia and the Whale, which is the companion book I wrote to that. I really enjoyed writing that and being in this world. And that was the book that kind of made me realize, okay, I can do more than picture books. I can write these bigger books and these novels for kids. But yeah, once I say that, I'm like, well, wait, Bob is a unicorn. I can't leave out that. And then dog and mouse. So it's every book is so much of myself in those pages. I mean, I think it's so important. These kids deserve my absolute best effort, and so every single page I pour my heart out, and every line of the illustration matters so much to me. And I think, when I was getting rejected, I had a lot of people that said my art was too flat, didn't have enough movement, it's not right for children's books. And I'm very old school. My style is a very old school illustration style. It's very Raggedy Ann, Peanuts, and that's what I grew up loving. But I paint the way I looked for things when I was a kid. I love the little details in the illustrations. I love wondering, oh, why did they do that? Or I loved seeing the edges where it was so obvious it was a brush stroke. Like that, I didn't want it computer. I didn't want perfect. I wanted to see the human being behind it. And that's what I try to make sure I keep giving to kids, is they realize this is a person behind this. Somebody painted this. Somebody did this for you. And so I don't know if that's what resonates, but they're all of them are my stories. They're all, at some point I was Cordelia. At some point I was Bob as a unicorn. At some point I was, the little boy with the WhatIf Monster. So they're all basically me just being vulnerable and telling my stories. But I don't realize I'm doing that until afterwards. Like, I never wrote any of those stories trying to tell my story. I told a story that a character showed up and told me, and afterwards I look back and I go, oh, okay, that was me. But I don't, set out in the beginning to do that.
Yeah. Well, you currently are going around speaking to schools, and you do that all over the country, and you haven't yet been to Idaho. Is there some kind of message you'd like to leave for people specifically in eastern Idaho where we're located?
Give me a reason to come. I will come. I've been used to just go for an entire week at a time and try to get as many schools in as I could. But because I'm more flexible now and I can come for just, I will come for a couple of schools, or I just did an event in Pennsylvania where I did a fundraising event for Thon with Penn State. I also did an event helping to raise money for Jana Marie Foundation, which is a suicide awareness for children and teenagers, and a reading council. So if anybody's, reading this and they're like, oh, she would be great for our event, contact me. I'm super open to things.
How can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is either on Facebook and Michele Nelson-Schmidt, or my business page is MNS for Michele Nelson-Schmidt Creative, or on my website, MNS Creative. And you can contact me message me on Facebook or email me from my website.
Well, Michele, thank you for making time to speak with me today. It's been a pleasure. And your book 4 in the WhatIf Monster series, you said, is out in April?
Yes, April 1st. It is Gabby and the Mean Girl is book 4.
And that will be available through your website, or will it be available on Amazon and other places?
I do. It is on Amazon and my website. And, of course, I always encourage your local bookstore. You can get my books through indiebooks.org. So you can always have your local bookstore order them. If you don't want to go through Amazon and you want to support your local bookstore, you can ask them to either contact me directly, or they can get them through my distributor.
Anything else you want to add, Michele, about your career, about your message to kids, anything?
That any adults that are listening to this or reading this, I say, kids, they are extraordinarily intelligent beings that I don't think we give them near enough credit for, and they are just smaller humans, and they are capable of so much more than we think. they're pretty amazing, and I don't think we give them enough credit for what they can handle in this world when we just talk honestly with them and then listen to what they have to say. I just love the kids so much, and I just hope I keep writing books for them forever.
Well, my kids love it. I know a lot of people love your work, and hopefully we get to see you come through Eastern Idaho at some point in the future.
I would absolutely love that. That would be fantastic.
Now, again, if you'd like to get in touch with Michele to speak at your school or event, you can reach out to her via her website, mnscreative.com. She's also available on Facebook, facebook.com/mnscreative. I'm Wright Nelson with EastIdahoNews.com. Thanks for listening.